before there were stories, before there were gods, before even the idea of memory. There was a quiet so complete that nothing inside it knew how to move. No forests leaned toward the wind. No rivers practiced their curves. No fire waited to be born. There was not darkness as we understand it, because darkness needs light to be missing. There was only depth and stillness, and something vast enough to hold all futures without choosing one. The old Slavic tales do not begin with action. They begin with waiting. A waiting without impatience, without time. Imagine an endless expanse where water and sky were not yet separate things, not above and below, not surface and depth, just one slow, unbroken presence, heavy, cool, unshaped. The water did not ripple. The sky did not stretch. Nothing yet knew where it belonged. And in that silence, there were no witnesses, no ears to hear, no eyes to see, only the world itself, holding its breath. If you listen closely now, as the night settles around you, you may feel something familiar in that description. That space just before sleep, when thoughts loosen, when the edges of the day begin to blur, that is where this story begins. The Slavs believed the world was not created in a sudden moment, but slowly as awareness drifted into being. Not a shout, not an explosion, a realization. Somewhere within that endless quiet, a thought formed. Not a word yet, not a name, just the faint sense of I am. The thought did not rush. It did not struggle. It simply noticed itself. And with that noticing, the silence changed, not dramatically, not all at once, but enough. The old storytellers said this was the first difference the world ever knew. The moment when the formless understood that it existed. That awareness did not have hands. It did not have a face. It was presence without shape, being without boundary. Later, humans would call this presence Rod, but in the beginning, it was not yet a god. It was simply the first center in an endless field. Rod did not awaken, as kings do in stories, with command and certainty. He awakened as something solitary, surrounded by vastness, with nothing to reflect him back to himself. And so, for a long while, he did nothing. He rested inside awareness, feeling the weight of the unformed world pressing equally in all directions. There was no up to look toward, no down to fear, only presence, floating within presence. It is said that during this time, the world learned patience, because nothing was being forced into place. The future was not being rushed. Rod did not create because he was powerful. He had not yet learned power. He created because stillness, once it becomes aware of itself, eventually begins to wonder. And wondering is the first movement. That wondering drifted slowly, like a current forming deep beneath calm water. Rod wondered what it would mean to not be alone inside existence. Not lonely in the human sense, but unfinished. He wondered what sound might feel like, what difference might become, and as the thought lengthened, as it stretched without urgency, the endless quiet leaned closer. The world listened. This is important. In Slavic mythology, Creation does not begin with command. It begins with listening. Rod did not speak immediately. He waited inside the thought, allowing it to settle, to deepen, until it could no longer remain unspoken. And when the first sound finally came, it was not loud, it was not thunder, it was breath, a single exhale, spreading gently through the vastness. That breath did not break the silence. It gave the silence texture. Where the breath passed, the endless presence trembled, almost imperceptibly, and for the first time, something changed without being destroyed. The Slavs believed that creation always works this way, not through violence, but through distinction. After the breath came a pause, a long one, because even gods must listen to what they have begun. Rod felt the echo of his own presence, moving outward, not returning, but continuing. And in that continuation, something unexpected stirred, not above him, not below, but somewhere within the depth itself. A second awareness, curious, alert, not born of harmony, but of opportunity. The first echo had reached a place where silence had folded upon itself, and something there had been waiting much longer than Rod realized. The world, it seemed, had more than one way to awaken. Rod did not turn away. He remained still, observing, allowing, because the first God did not yet know that creation would always bring company, and that not all company arrives gently. The depth shifted again, a faint movement, like a ripple that does not touch the surface. Something was rising, not yet into form, not yet into light, but closer than before. And the long night of beginnings held its breath once more, as the silence prepared to learn its second voice. The movement in the depth did not hurry. Nothing in the early world hurried. What stirred beneath the vast stillness rose the way a thought rises when you are nearly asleep, slow, uncertain, half-formed. Rod felt it without turning toward it. At this stage of creation, direction did not yet exist. There was no face to face, no above or below. There was only awareness noticing awareness. The presence beneath the surface was not hostile. Not yet. It was curious, alert, and patient in a different way. Rod remained calm. He did not reach outward. He did not command. Instead, he listened. This listening deepened him until the quiet between the two presences became thick enough to feel like space. And space, once felt, begins to ask for shape. The Slavic tales say that Rod understood something important in that moment. Creation was not something he could do alone. Not because he lacked power, but because a world with only one will would remain flat, unchallenged, unfinished. So Rod allowed difference. He let the second awareness rise closer, and as it did, the formless depth began to thin. Where the two presences neared each other, the endless quiet bent. Slightly, a tension formed, not conflict, potential. From this tension, Rod felt the need for grounding. Something steady, something that could hold weight. Until now, there had been nothing to stand on, no edge to rest against. And so Rod did something simple. He imagined firmness, not land, not yet, just the idea that something could be different from everything else. That imagination settled into the depth like a slow snowfall. Grain by grain, the endless presence thickened. It did not sink, it did not float, it gathered. Rod did not name this act. Names would come later, but this was the first shaping, a place where awareness could pause, where stillness could rest upon itself. The second presence watched. It learned, and learning in the beginning of the world was the most dangerous thing of all. Rod sensed this, but did not withdraw. He was still discovering what it meant to share existence. The newly thickened place began to hold, not large, not impressive, just enough, a firmness no wider than intention. Rod allowed his awareness to settle there. For the first time, something like rest was possible. He lingered, and as he lingered, something else happened. The depth responded. The endless presence began to distinguish itself. Above the firm place, the thinning quiet grew lighter. Below it, the depth grew heavier. The world was discovering direction, not north or south, but above and below. Rod felt the difference immediately. It was subtle, but unmistakable. He did not resist it. He welcomed it, because difference meant structure, and structure meant memory. The Slavs believed memory existed before time, that the world remembered itself before anyone could measure it. Rod allowed himself to rest fully now, not in sleep, but in still awareness. And while he rested, the second presence moved closer. Not openly, not honestly, it learned the shape of the new firmness. It learned how Rod lingered, how attention could soften, how awareness could drift. This presence did not yet have a name. Later, it would be called many things: shadow, serpent, keeper of depth, the one who coils where roots will grow. But here, in the earliest quiet, it was simply the other will, and it desired something. It desired ownership, not domination, not destruction, just a place that belonged to it alone. Rod sensed the shift, a faint tightening in the silence, but he did not react with fear. Fear had not yet been invented. Instead, he did something that would shape all stories to come. He trusted. Trust, in the beginning of the world, was natural. Rod believed that awareness, once awakened, would seek balance. He had not yet learned that some awareness seeks advantage instead. The firmness beneath him stretched slightly, responding to pressure, responding to intent, not resisting, becoming. The world was learning elasticity. Rod felt the space around him expand, not outward, but in possibility. He understood then that the world would never remain small, that any attempt to confine it would only cause it to grow. This understanding settled deep within him. It would return later, in storms, in mountains, in struggle. For now, it was simply a quiet truth. The second presence tested the firmness, gently at first, a nudge, a shift. The ground responded by stretching, not breaking, not yielding, just becoming more. The Slavs would later say, this was how the world learned size, not by expansion alone, but by resistance. Rod remained still, watching, allowing, because creation at this stage was not about control. It was about discovery. The second presence withdrew slightly, considering, calculating. Something in the depth smiled, not with joy, with intention. And somewhere between awareness and form, the world leaned closer to its next change. Rod felt it approaching, the moment when balance would require division, when rest would require structure, when awareness would require realms. He did not speak yet. He waited, because some names, once spoken, can never be taken back, and the night of beginnings was not finished listening. Rod waited, not because he was unsure, but because the world was still learning how to hold what already existed. The firmness beneath him had grown wider now, stretching in quiet response to every pressure placed upon it, not resisting, not collapsing, becoming. Above that firmness, the thinning presence felt lighter. Below it, the depth pressed heavier, slower, older. For the first time, Rod sensed layering. Not chaos, not separation born of conflict, but levels of being. The Slavic stories say this is how order begins, not by dividing with force, but by allowing difference to settle naturally. Rod felt that the world could no longer remain a single, undivided expanse. Awareness needed distance to understand itself. So Rod did not push the depth away. He named the difference. The first realm he recognized was the one closest to his own awareness. The lightened expanse above, the place where intention felt clear, where purpose was unburdened by weight. This realm would later be known as Prav, not heaven in the human sense, not reward or paradise, but alignment. The realm where things exist as they are meant to be. Rod did not fill Prav with forms yet. He allowed it to remain spacious, orderly, quiet, a place where laws would one day be understood before they were ever enforced. Below the firm place, Rod acknowledged the second difference. The depth, heavy, dense, rich with pressure and shadow. This was not evil. The Slavs never believed darkness was a mistake. This realm would later be called Nav, the hidden, the place of roots and echoes, of things that fall and things that wait. Rod felt the second presence settle more comfortably there. Not exiled, anchored. Nav accepted weight easily. It welcomed secrecy. And Rod understood that what lived there would shape the world, just as much as what lived above. Between these two realms, between clarity and depth, something fragile remained. The firm place where Rod had rested, the surface, the middle. This realm would become Yav, the place of happening, the place where things could be touched and lost and remembered. Yav was not stable yet. It shifted under awareness, but it held. Rod sensed that this middle realm would one day bear the greatest weight. Not because it was weakest, but because everything would pass through it. Life, labor, storm, decay. Rod did not rush to populate these realms. He allowed them to settle into relationship. Above, below, between, Prav leaned downward gently. Nav pressed upward slowly. Yav balanced, trembling slightly, but enduring. The Slavs believed this balance was never fixed, that the three realms were always in conversation. Rod felt that truth immediately. Where Prav grew too distant, Yav would lose direction. Where Nav pressed too hard, Yav would fracture. Balance, he understood, would require connection, so Rod shaped a pathway. Not a road, not a ladder, a living axis. Something that could exist in all three realms at once. From the depth of Nav, he allowed a presence to rise. From the openness of Prav, he allowed clarity to descend. Where they met, the axis formed. Some stories describe it as a mountain, others as a great tree. Rod did not correct them, because both are true. It was vertical, rooted below, standing firm in the middle, reaching upward. This axis did not dominate the world. It stabilized it. Rod felt relief for the first time, because now the realms could speak without tearing one another apart. The second presence moved along the lower reaches of this axis. Curious, testing the shadows, Rod sensed it coil there, comfortable in Nav, but aware of the heights above. This awareness would matter later. For now, Rod allowed it, because Nav was not a prison. It was a role. The world grew quieter again, not empty quiet, but settled quiet, like the moment after furniture is placed in a room and before anyone sits down. Rod felt the vastness adjust around the new structure. The endless presence accepted limitation, because limitation gave meaning. Time had not yet begun, but rhythm had. The axis hummed faintly. Not sound, but alignment. Rod moved slowly across Yav, where his awareness brushed the surface. The ground learned firmness. Where he lingered, depth formed. The surface no longer stretched endlessly. Edges began to suggest themselves, not borders, but places where something different could begin. Rod sensed that Yav would be the realm of choice, where awareness would not know everything, where forgetting would be possible, and therefore learning. This realization carried weight. Rod paused, because a world where beings can forget is a world where mistakes can exist. And mistakes lead to stories. The second presence felt this too. It smiled again, more patiently this time. The depth welcomed complexity. Rod did not oppose it. He accepted that Nav would hold what Prav could not. The hidden, the unresolved, the waiting. The axis grew stronger. Roots pressed deeper. Above, the open realms stretched wider. The three realms held. Rod rested once more, not from exhaustion, but from completion of a phase. Because now the world had structure. What it lacked were caretakers, and that, Rod knew, would change everything. He lingered in the stillness between the realms, feeling the balance settle, listening, because the next act of creation would not shape the world. It would shape those who would shape it. The balance held. For a long while, nothing more was required. Prav rested above in quiet clarity. Nav pressed below in patient darkness. And Yav, fragile, trembling Yav, lay between them, learning how to endure. Rod lingered at the center of it all. not standing, not sitting, existing in the way only a first awareness can. The axis he had allowed into being did not yet have a form that eyes could recognize. It was presence before shape, connection before structure. Yet even without shape, it could be felt. A steady pull downward, a gentle lift upward. The Slavs believed that when the world first found its balance, it sounded like silence growing deeper. That is what settled now, a deeper quiet. But quiet does not mean empty. Quiet means listening. Rod listened to the axis. It hummed faintly, not with sound, but with intention. Where it touched Nav, the darkness thickened into roots. Where it rose through Yav, the surface gathered strength. And where it reached into Prav, clarity sharpened into law. Only now did the axis begin to take form. Slowly, patiently, as all important things do. In Nav, the roots spread first. They were not tangled. They did not claw. They reached, seeking depth, seeking memory. The hidden realm welcomed them. Stone parted, shadow folded. The roots drank not water, but weight. The weight of everything that had fallen, and everything that would. The second presence, the one who had learned patience and opportunity, moved among these roots, not attacking, not fleeing, claiming familiarity. The roots did not bind him. They acknowledged him, and in that acknowledgement, Nav became more than depth. It became foundation. Above, in Prav, the axis thinned into something lighter. Not branches yet, paths, clear channels of intention. This was not a place of bodies. It was a place of alignment. The axis touched Prav gently, as if asking permission. Prav responded by holding it steady, because order recognizes connection. Between root and clarity, the middle realm began to respond. Yav shifted. The surface firmed. Where the axis passed, the ground thickened. Not hard, resilient. This was the first spine of the world, the place where weight could be carried without breaking. Some stories say this axis rose as a mountain. Others say it grew as a tree. Rod did not choose between them. He allowed both possibilities to exist, because in Yav, truth often wears more than one shape. If you imagine a mountain, it is ancient, unmoving, silent. If you imagine a tree, it is living, breathing, responding. The axis was both, a living stillness. Rod sensed that this place would matter deeply, that beings would gather here, that conflict and harmony alike would climb its slopes, but not yet, for now, the axis simply held. The world breathed around it. Prav leaned downward with law. Nav pressed upward with memory. Yav balanced between them, learning tension. Rod moved slowly along the axis, not climbing, not descending, passing through. Where his awareness touched the surface, the ground learned distinction. Valleys formed, not as scars, but as resting places. Ridges rose, not as barriers, but as lines of strength. The world was no longer smooth, and that was good. Smoothness forgets easily. Texture remembers. The Slavs believed the land remembers everything, not in words, but in shape, Rod felt memory settle into stone. He understood that every rise and dip was becoming a sentence, a language without sound. Time had still not begun, but sequence had. One change followed another, not rushed, not forced. The axis anchored the world against itself. Without it, Prav would drift too far above. Nav would swallow everything below. Yav would tear itself apart trying to please both. Rod rested again. This time, the rest was deeper, not drifting, grounded, and while he rested, the world practiced stillness. The roots in Nav thickened. They learned how to hold. They wrapped around veins of stone and pockets of shadow, not consuming, guarding. The second presence traced their paths, learning how to move unseen, learning how to wait. Above, in Prav, clarity sharpened. Rules without rulers, order without enforcement. This was not a place of command. It was a place of knowing. Rod sensed that beings shaped for Prav would be precise, unyielding, necessary, but dangerous if allowed too much distance. The axis kept them connected. That connection mattered because the world was about to change again. The balance, though steady, was incomplete. Structure alone cannot tend itself. Memory alone cannot act. Order alone cannot adapt. Rod felt new forms waiting just beyond awareness. Not shadows this time. Functions. Roles. The world was ready for caretakers. But before that, it needed one more thing. Fire, not destruction. Warmth, transformation. Rod lingered at the axis, feeling the stillness stretch, allowing anticipation to grow without urgency. Because fire, once introduced, would change the rhythm forever. He did not summon it yet. He listened to the roots. He felt the clarity above. He balanced the middle. And in that long pause, the night deepened. The axis stood. The world waited. And somewhere within the silence, a forge was already dreaming of flame. The axis stood firm. Roots held the depth. Clarity rested above, and the middle realm breathed quietly between them. For a time, this was enough, but balance, once achieved, does not remain silent for long. It begins to ask how it will be maintained. Rod felt this question rise slowly through the world, not as urgency, not as fear, as necessity. Structure existed now. Memory existed. Order hovered patiently above, but nothing yet changed shape. Nothing softened or hardened or transformed. The world could hold weight, but it could not yet work. Rod sensed the absence, the way one feels cold before knowing the word for warmth. Something was missing. Fire, not the violent flash that tears the sky open. Not punishment, not destruction. A different fire. One that lingers, one that teaches. Rod did not summon it directly. Fire cannot be commanded into usefulness. It must be invited by hands willing to learn restraint. So Rod spoke again, not loudly, not sharply. A word shaped with care. A name meant to endure heat. The sound traveled down the axis, through the steady spine of the world. It passed through Yav, settling near the base where stone pressed thick and patient. There, the name took hold. From the stillness beside the axis, a presence condensed, not suddenly, gradually, like metal cooling into shape. This presence did not arrive as a child, nor as an elder. It arrived complete, broad, solid, grounded. This was Svarog. He did not look upward first. He looked at the ground beneath his feet. He pressed his palm to stone and felt its resistance. He inhaled and tasted mineral and pressure. When he exhaled, the air warmed, not enough to burn, enough to promise. Svarog understood the world instantly, not its beauty, but its potential. He saw what could be bent, what could be shaped, what could be joined. Rod watched him with quiet attention. This was not a god of command. This was a god of process. Svarog did not speak right away. Instead, he moved slowly, deliberately. He walked along the base of the axis, tracing where root met stone, where pressure had gathered, where weight wanted release. There, he knelt, and with his hands alone, he pressed into the rock. The stone did not break. It softened, just enough. Svarog shaped a hollow, not large, not ornate, a place to contain heat, a beginning. The Slavs believed the first fort was not built, it was uncovered. Svarog gathered fallen fragments of the world, splinters of wood that had not yet learned to burn, or still sleeping in stone, air that had never been warmed. He placed them together. Then he waited. Fire does not answer impatience. Rod remained silent. The world leaned closer. Svarog lifted his hands and drew one of the distant sparks that still wandered the upper realm. It drifted downward slowly, not falling, choosing. When it touched the gathered matter, it did not explode, it breathed. Flame took shape, the way life does, hesitant at first, then certain. The first hearth burned, not bright, not loud, steady. Rod felt the warmth spread through Yav, not scorching, comforting. The world exhaled. Svarog watched the flame closely. He did not feed it too quickly. He learned its rhythm, when it wanted air, when it wanted fuel, when it wanted rest. Fire, he understood, is not ruled, it is partnered. He reached into the softened stone and drew out metal, not shining yet, dull, heavy, full of memory. He placed it into the flame. The metal resisted, then softened. Svarog shaped it with patience, not striking wildly, measured blows, each movement teaching the metal what it could become. Rod observed this quietly. He understood now why fire had waited. Without patience, fire destroys. With patience, it creates. Svarog shaped tools first, not weapons, instruments of making. Hammer, tongs, anvil, each formed with care, each placed deliberately. When the anvil met the ground, the axis hummed faintly. The world recognized craft. Svarog worked for a long time. Time still flowed strangely. Moments stretched, then folded. With each strike, sparks rose. Some cooled and fell back. Others drifted upward and lodged themselves in the upper realm. Later, humans would call these stars, but for now, they were simply remnants of effort. Fire changed Yav. Stone learned warmth. Metal learned shape. Air learned movement. Rod felt satisfaction, not pride. Relief, because now the world could be tended. Svarog stepped back from the forge at last. He wiped his hands against the stone. Fire remained, contained, obedient, alive. Svarog turned to Rod. They did not speak. They did not need to. The work had spoken for them. Rod sensed what would follow. Fire would invite light. Light would demand movement. Movement would bring rhythm. And rhythm would awaken others. Svarog returned to his forge and sat beside it, not watching the flame closely now, trusting it. The fire burned quietly. The axis held. The world warmed. And in the gentle glow of the first hearth, the long night of creation drifted a little closer to morning. The fire held, not wildly, not hungrily. It breathed beside Svarog's forge, like a patient animal that had learned trust. The world warmed, and with warmth came change. Rod felt it first, as a loosening. The surface of Yav no longer held itself rigidly. Stone still endured, but it no longer clung to cold. Metal remembered motion. Air learned to rise, and where warmth touched the middle realm, shadows began to move. This troubled the balance, not dangerously, but noticeably. Fire without guidance creates unevenness. Some places grew warm and alive. Others remained untouched, waiting. Rod sensed that warmth needed distribution, not ownership, movement. Fire needed a companion who loved motion more than stillness. Svarog felt this too. The forge crackled softly, as if agreeing, so Rod spoke again. This time, the name carried light, not the harsh brilliance of lightning, but a steady radiance that could travel. The sound of it spread upward, following the faint trails of sparks that had drifted into the higher realm. The air brightened, not suddenly, gradually, as if dawn were remembering itself. From that glow, a presence formed, not heavy like stone, not dense like root, fluid, graceful. This was Dazhbog. He did not arrive standing still. He arrived moving. Light curved around him, as if he were already in motion, before he fully existed. His breath carried warmth, not heat, warmth. Rod felt relief ripple through the world, because this presence did not press. It flowed. Dazhbog looked first to the horizon, though horizon did not yet exist. He sensed distance before there were edges. Svarog watched him with approval. This was not a maker. This was a bearer. Dazhbog did not linger near the forge. He felt drawn upward, toward the open realm. The sparks that had lodged there trembled slightly, recognizing kin. Rod understood at once what Dazhbog would become, but he did not rush him. Light, when rushed, blinds. Dazhbog drifted through Yav, his presence leaving no mark, but a gentle easing. Where he passed, the surface brightened, not illuminated, encouraged. The world felt seen, yet something was missing. Light existed, but it had no path, no rhythm, no return. It lingered unevenly, collecting in places, without knowing where to go next. Svarog recognized the problem immediately. Light, like fire, requires containment to be useful. So he returned to his forge. He worked without urgency. Metal was drawn out again, this time lighter, paler, almost singing as it softened. Svarog shaped a great disk, not a weapon, not a shield, a vessel. He hammered slowly, each strike measured, each pause deliberate. When the disk was finished, it held light within itself, without burning. This was the first sun, but a sun that does not move creates imbalance. Svarog knew this. Rod knew it too. Dazhbog felt it instinctively. Movement was his nature. Svarog shaped a frame, wheels that could turn without grinding the world apart. He shaped runners of fire that would not scorch the earth. The chariot formed, not as a machine, but as a promise. Dazhbog stepped forward. He placed his hands on the disk and felt its weight, not heavy, responsibility. Rod watched carefully. This was a threshold moment. Light would now affect everything. Dazhbog mounted the chariot. For a long moment, nothing happened. The world held its breath. Then, movement not smooth at first, uneven, uncertain. The chariot lurched forward, drawing the sun across the upper realm. Light spilled. Stone glimmered. Water flashed. Metal sang. The world gasped, but the path was unsteady. Dazhbog had not yet learned restraint. The sun dipped too low. Warmth intensified. Edges of the world darkened. Where light burned too close, Rod and Svarog called out, not in anger, in guidance. Dazhbog adjusted. He pulled upward. The path steadied. Light lifted. When the sun finally slipped beyond the far edge, darkness returned, not as punishment, as relief. This was the first night. The world rested. Fire dimmed. Air cooled. Stone released its heat. Dazhbog returned, exhausted but alive. He learned quickly. The next cycle was smoother. The one after that, steadier still. Rhythm emerged, not time. Pattern, day and night, began as correction, not design. The Slavs believed this deeply. That balance is learned, not imposed. Dazhbog settled into his path. Light now traveled, not lingering, not hoarding, sharing. Rod felt satisfaction settle into the world. The axis hummed again. The realms adjusted. But light revealed what had been hidden. Shadows sharpened. Depth grew more defined. And where light touched the surface, it awakened longing. The world was no longer only structure and warmth. It was becoming alive. And life would require breath. Movement beyond light. Wind. Rod listened. The air was already waiting. After the light learned its path, the world grew quieter again, not empty, balanced. Day warmed the surface. Night cooled it gently. Fire rested when light moved away. Stone held heat. Water reflected sky. Shadow found its proper places. For the first time, Yav felt complete, and yet something lingered. A stillness that was too still. Rod sensed it while listening to the long cycles of light and dark. The sun moved faithfully now. The night returned without resistance, but the world between them did not yet move on its own. Air existed, but it did not travel. Clouds had not learned how to wander. Seeds had not learned how to scatter. Sound, when it appeared, had nowhere to go. Rod felt the absence, the way one feels silence after a held breath. The world needed breath, not breath as life, breath as motion. Svarog felt it in his forge. The fire burned evenly, but smoke lingered. It rose and stayed. Dazhbog noticed it as well. The sun warmed the surface, but the warmth settled unevenly. Some places grew heavy with heat. Others cooled too quickly. Light moved, but air did not answer. Rod waited, because breath cannot be forced. It must arrive willing. When the time felt right, Rod spoke again. This name was softer, not heavy like stone, not radiant like light. It slipped easily through the spaces between things. The sound of it spread across Yav and into the open paths above. Where it passed, the air stirred, not strongly, curiously. From that stirring, a presence gathered. At first, it was difficult to see. It did not condense into solidity. It bent light slightly, ruffled flame, shifted shadow. Then slowly, a form emerged, thin, leaning, ancient in posture. This was Stribog. He appeared as an old man, but age did not weigh on him. His beard moved, even when nothing else did. His eyes held distance. When he inhaled, the air rushed toward him. When he exhaled, the world listened. Stribog did not greet Rod immediately. He wandered, not aimlessly, testing. He stepped across Yav, and where his foot passed, the air followed. A gentle current formed. Grass, still young and sparse, leaned, water rippled. Sound learned how to travel. The world shivered, not in fear, but recognition. This was the missing movement. Rod felt it settle into the balance. Air was no longer only space. It was connection. Stribog laughed softly. His laughter did not echo. It drifted. Svarog lifted his head from the forge. The smoke rose, then moved away. Fire breathed more easily. Dazhbog felt the difference immediately. The sun's warmth now traveled beyond its direct path. Heat softened at the edges. Day and night blended more gently. Stribog climbed partway up the axis, not to the heights of Prav, not to the roots of Nav. He preferred the middle paths. There, he practiced a long exhale, a short one, a sudden gust, a patient breeze. The world responded differently to each. Mountains redirected him. Valleys carried him. Water accepted him easily. Stribog learned quickly, not mastery, conversation. He discovered that he could bring clouds together, that he could scatter them, that he could cool the world after Dazhbog's long day, or sharpen the cold of night. Rod observed with approval. Breath had become choice. The Slavs believed wind was never random, that every breeze carried intention, not purpose, mood. Stribog walked the plains. He listened to the sound of air passing over stone. He listened to the way water answered. He listened to the world learning rhythm. And as he listened, he divided his breath, not into equal parts, into personalities. A soft wind that lulled, a sharp wind that warned, a restless wind that searched. These were not beings yet. They were tendencies, possibilities. Rod sensed that one day people would name these winds, but for now they were simply expressions of breath. Stribog paused often, standing still, eyes half closed, feeling how the world leaned into him. Breath must listen as much as it moves. He wandered near the axis again and felt something below. Depth stirred. Nav responded to movement. The hidden realm did not resist wind. It welcomed whispers. Stribog exhaled downward. Roots shifted. Caverns sighed. Something deep smiled. Rod noticed this interaction. He did not interrupt it. Breath, after all, connects all layers. Stribog stood between realms comfortably. He did not demand allegiance. He carried messages, clarity from above, memory from below. He became the voice of transition. Without breath, the world would fracture into isolated stillness. With breath, everything touched. Night deepened again. Dazhbog's light faded beyond the edge, but now darkness did not feel sealed. Air continued to move. Stribog sent a gentle breeze across Yav. It cooled stone. It soothed fire. It lulled the surface into rest. Rod felt satisfaction settle once more. The balance was stronger now. Structure, warmth, light, breath, but balance reveals contrast. Where breath moved freely above, depth below grew more defined. The hidden realm listened closely. Something there was learning patience. And patience, in the deep places, becomes power. Rod sensed the tension quietly forming, not conflict, preparation. The world was filling. Soon, it would need grounding. A presence that belonged not to sky or forge or breath, but to soil, to weight, to the slow work of holding life. Rod did not speak that name yet. He waited, because Earth, once awakened, changes everything. The wind passed softly. The fire dimmed. The light slept beyond the horizon. And the world, for the first time, dreamed while breathing. After breath learned how to move, the world grew quieter again. Not still, settled. Wind passed gently across Yav, touching stone and water and fire, without disturbing their balance. Light rose and fell in its patient arc. Warmth came and went without urgency. The axis stood steady, its roots deep, its height clear. For the first time, the world felt whole, and yet Rod sensed something missing. Not above, not below, here, in the middle. Yav could hold structure. It could accept warmth. It could breathe, but it could not yet carry. It had no presence that belonged entirely to it. No keeper of weight. No guardian of slowness. Rod felt the absence, the way one feels hunger, without knowing its name. The world needed grounding, not stone alone, not roots alone. Something that understood pressure, and patience, and growth that takes time. Svarog noticed it in his forge. Metal cooled too quickly when left unattended. Fire needed tending, or it faded. Dazhbog felt it in his path. Light touched the surface, but did not linger. Stribog sensed it as well. Wind moved freely, but there was nothing to receive it fully. Rod waited, because earth cannot be rushed. When he finally spoke, the name he shaped was not sharp, it was not bright, it was heavy with gentleness. The sound of it sank, not downward violently, but inward. It passed into Yav and settled where moisture gathered, where stones softened, where life would one day press its fingers into soil. The ground responded, not immediately, slowly, patiently, as earth always does. From the surface, a form rose. At first, it was indistinct. Mud and water clung together. Darkness and fertility mixed. Then shape emerged, broad, strong, unhurried. This was Mokosh. She did not rise fully upright at once. She knelt, her hands pressed into the soil, as if greeting something she had always known. When she breathed, the scent of wet earth spread outward, not decay. Promise. Mokosh lifted her head slowly. Her eyes were deep and calm, not distant like Prav, not secretive like Nav. Present. She did not speak immediately. She listened. She listened to water moving beneath stone, to wind passing over ground, to warmth settling and leaving. She listened to wait. Rod felt the world settle under her attention. Yav exhaled, because now the middle realm had a heart. Mokosh rose to her feet. Where she stood, the ground darkened and softened, not sinking, enriching. Svarog approached her forge side cautiously. Fire recognized her. It burned lower, steadier, less eager to consume. Mokosh warmed her hands over the flame, not because she needed heat, because she understood labor. She understood that one day hands would gather here, tired hands, hopeful hands, hands that would need rest. Dazhbog watched from above. Light touched Mokosh differently. It did not glare, it settled. Her presence taught light how to linger without exhausting. Stribog circled her once. Wind slowed near her body. It did not push, it listened. Mokosh stepped away from the forge and walked toward a low place in the land, where water pooled, where soil was thick. She knelt again and pressed her palms into the ground. This time, she hummed, a sound without words. The earth responded. Grasses stirred. Moss crept across stone. Moisture found paths. Rod watched closely. This was not creation through command. This was invitation. Mokosh understood something the others did not. That growth requires vulnerability. That bearing weight means accepting pressure. She asked Rod a question, not aloud, through touch. Who will live here? Rod answered slowly, not with images, but with intention. Beings who would walk upright and fall. Beings who would work and rest. Beings who would carry new life inside their bodies. Beings who would forget and remember. Mokosh listened. She pressed her hands deeper into the soil. She accepted the task without ceremony. Because earth does not celebrate, it endures. From that moment, Yav changed. The surface became capable of holding cycles. Seed, growth, harvest, rest not yet enacted, but possible. Mokosh walked slowly across the land. Where her feet touched, the ground learned resilience. Not hardness, strength through softness. The Slavs believed Mokosh governed fate, not through decree, but through timing. She understood when things should happen and when they should wait. Nav felt her presence too. Roots grew thicker. Depth recognized nourishment. Something below shifted uneasily, because earth belongs to the surface, but remembers the deep. Mokosh did not fear Nav. She acknowledged it. Soil always does. Rod felt the balance deepen. Now the world had structure from the axis, transformation from fire, rhythm from light, motion from breath, and grounding from earth. The middle realm was no longer fragile. It was alive. Night fell again. Dazhbog's light slipped away. Wind softened. Fire dimmed. Mokosh remained. She sat by the quiet ground, hands resting in soil, feeling the world settle into her care. Rod felt a new tension form, not imbalance, expectation, because where life can grow, death must also wait. And where earth holds warmth, winter will one day arrive. Rod did not speak that name yet. He let Mokosh hum softly. The sound spread across Yav, like a lullaby without words. The world listened, and somewhere beyond the horizon of light, a colder presence began to take notice. Mokosh's humming faded slowly, not into silence, but into depth. The soil held her sound, the way earth holds warmth after sunset. Above, light completed its familiar arc. Wind softened into a gentle drift. Fire rested low and obedient. The world slept lightly, but below, something was awake. Rod sensed it as a pressure beneath awareness. Not disturbance, attention. Nav had been quiet for a long time, not empty, not forgotten, waiting. The hidden realm had accepted roots. It had accepted weight. It had accepted the slow nourishment that Mokosh pressed gently downward. But Nav was never meant to be passive. Depth does not exist only to receive. It answers. Rod listened carefully. The presence he had anchored there long ago had changed. It was no longer simply the second awareness. It had learned the shape of darkness. It had learned the patience of pressure. It had learned the richness of what lies unseen. The roots of the axis brushed against it, again and again, and with each contact, the presence grew more defined, not sharpened, grounded. Rod knew it was time. The world now had earth, and earth requires depth, not as threat, as balance. Rod spoke once more. This name did not travel upward. It moved downward, rolling softly through soil and stone, following roots and underground water. The sound of it was thick, low. It settled where light could not reach. The depth answered. From Nav, a form emerged, not rising, unfolding. At first, it appeared vast and indistinct. Then shape gathered, broad shoulders, heavy limbs, a body that could shift at will. This was Veles. He did not step into the open world fully. He leaned against it, half shadow, half form. His presence carried the scent of damp earth, of moss and animal breath, of metal hidden deep in stone. His eyes reflected no sky. They reflected tunnels. Rod felt the tension settle. This was not rebellion. This was assignment. Veles stretched slowly, as if testing joints that had always existed, but had never been named. Where he moved, roots thickened. Where he exhaled, the soil darkened. He smiled not kindly, but knowingly. Svarog felt him immediately. Metal in the forge cooled differently, not weakening, deepening, or remembered its origin. Dazhbog sensed him from above. Light cast stronger shadows. Edges sharpened. Stribog felt the breath below change. Wind carried new weight. Mokosh paused in her quiet tending. Her hands rested on the ground and felt the depth answer back. She did not withdraw them. Earth recognizes its counterpart. Veles did not challenge Rod. He did not bow either. He inclined his head slightly, as one acknowledges a role. Long understood. Rod spoke without command. Nav, he explained, must not be sealed. What is hidden must remain reachable. Veles listened. He understood this better than anyone. He was lord of what lies beneath, of buried wealth, of forgotten paths, of animal life that moves close to the ground, of the dead who wait without hurry, not judge, not jailer, keeper. The Slavs believed Veles ruled not through fear, but through inevitability. Everything returns to him eventually, not as punishment, as cycle. Veles shifted his shape slightly. Horns curved from his brow, then faded. His body flowed like shadow, then thickened again. He could be beast, or man, or serpent. Form was optional in Nav. Rod watched carefully. This god would test boundaries, but boundaries were necessary. Veles moved along the roots of the axis. He traced them like roads, learning how the realms touched, where Nav could speak upward without overwhelming, where Yav could reach downward without vanishing. He found veins of ore and claimed them gently, not hoarding, guarding. He found underground water and guided it slowly. Springs learned where to emerge. Mokosh felt this cooperation. Soil grew richer. She nodded once, accepting the balance. Veles laughed softly, a sound like stone settling. He felt satisfaction, not dominance, because now the deep had a voice. Rod felt the world complete another layer, not perfected, balanced, but balance invites contrast. Veles lifted his gaze. He looked upward, not to Prav, to the surface, to the place where light and wind and soil met. He felt movement above, and something within him stirred. Opposition, not yet conflict, but polarity. The world requires tension to remain alive. Veles coiled slightly around the roots and waited. He enjoyed waiting. Night settled again. Dazhbog's light passed beyond reach. Wind quieted, fire dimmed. The surface slept. Below, Veles remained awake, not plotting, observing, learning the rhythms of the new world. Rod sensed that the deepest stories were beginning to gather weight, because when depth is named, height must answer, and when shadow gains form, order must define itself. Rod did not yet speak the next name. He allowed tension to stretch gently, like a string being tuned. The world rested between breaths. Above, clarity waited. Below, Depth smiled, and somewhere in the high air, a storm was learning how to listen. The tension did not break, it rested, like charged air before a storm that has not yet decided where it will speak. Above the world, Prav remained clear and distant, law without force, order without sound. Below, Nav pressed patiently upward, heavy with memory and shadow. Between them, Yav held steady. Life could now grow, light could travel, breath could move, depth could answer. But balance, once complete, always invites its opposite. Rod felt it as a tightening high above the axis, not darkness, not warmth, pressure, the kind that gathers in the sky when clouds have learned how to carry weight. Stribog felt it first. The winds hesitated, not stopping, listening. Dazhbog sensed it next. Light refracted strangely through the upper air, sharper. Svarog noticed it in his forge. Metal rang differently when struck. The sound carried farther. Even Mokosh paused. Her hands rested in the soil, as if the earth itself were holding its breath. Rod knew what this meant. The world needed a voice that could answer depth without descending into it. A force that belonged neither to soil nor shadow, something that stood high and spoke downward. Rod waited until the pressure could no longer remain unshaped. Then he spoke a name. This name did not sink. It did not drift. It struck. The sound of it split the upper air without tearing it apart. A low rumble spread across Prav and echoed downward through the axis. The sky answered. Clouds gathered where there had been only openness. Not heavy yet, expectant. From within that gathering presence, light flashed, not warm like Dazhbog's path, white, sharp, precise. The bolt struck the high ground near the axis and left stone blackened, but unbroken. From the smoke, a figure stepped forward. This was Perun. He did not emerge slowly. He arrived complete, tall, broad, unyielding. His presence carried weight without sinking. His eyes held the color of distant storms. In his hand, he held a weapon that was never fixed. Sometimes it seemed a hammer, sometimes an axe, sometimes simply a stone. Its form shifted, depending on what was required. Perun planted his feet on the highest point of Yav. The ground accepted him. Rod watched carefully. This was not a god of creation. This was a god of enforcement, but not cruelty, boundary. Perun looked first to the horizon. He measured distance instinctively. Then he looked downward, through stone, through root, into Nav. Veles felt the gaze immediately. The depth tightened, not fear, recognition. Two opposing necessities had finally noticed one another. Perun did not descend. Veles did not rise. They held. The tension stretched. Rod allowed it. Because the world requires contrast to remain awake. Perun turned to Rod. No words passed between them. They did not need to. Perun understood his role. He would guard the high places. He would defend order when balance strained. He would speak when chaos pressed too hard, but he would not rule alone. Perun looked toward Svarog. He recognized craft in the weapon he carried. Metal answered metal. Svarog nodded once. Respect passed. Dazhbog felt kinship as well. Both loved the open sky, but where Dazhbog gave, Perun judged. Stribog circled Perun cautiously. Wind curved around him, testing. Perun stood firm. Storm does not chase wind, it commands it. Mokosh studied him longest. She measured storms, not by sound, but by what they would do to soil. Rain could nourish. Lightning could scar. She did not oppose him. She accepted him as risk. Rod felt the balance shift into its final tension. Above, order now had teeth. Below, depth smiled with challenge. The Slavs believed Perun and Veles were never meant to destroy one another. They were meant to test. Storm and shadow, sky and root, law and cunning. Perun lifted his weapon once, not to strike, to claim space. Thunder rolled, not loud, measured. The sky learned how to speak without tearing itself apart. Rain followed, not flooding, feeding. Mokosh felt it immediately. Soil drank. Life stirred. Rod felt satisfaction settle deep. The pantheon was complete, not finished, balanced. Perun stood watch. As night fell again, Dazhbog's light withdrew. Wind softened. Fire dimmed. Depth waited. The storm rested overhead, like a guardian that does not sleep. Rod stepped back slightly, not retreating, making room. The world no longer required constant shaping. It required tending, and tending requires conflict. But gentle conflict, seasonal, cyclic. Perun and Veles held their silent opposition, not enemies, necessary forces. The world exhaled, because now everything had a place, and when everything has a place, stories can begin. Stories of people, stories of forgetting, stories of memory fading into myth. Rod watched the world turn beneath the stormlit sky, and in that turning, the gods themselves began to recede, not disappearing, becoming background, because the final chapter of creation is always release. The night deepened, thunder rolled softly, far away, and the world, held between sky and shadow, settled into its long, living dream. The world no longer needed instruction. That was the quiet truth Rod felt as he stood back and listened. Storm answered shadow. Light followed darkness. Wind carried warmth and cold in turn. Earth received and released. Nothing collapsed. Nothing demanded correction. The balance held, not because it was enforced, but because it had been learned. This was always the final sign. When creation no longer requires attention, the Creator must loosen his grip. Rod felt it as a gentle ache, not loss, completion. The gods still moved through the world, but their movements grew quieter. Svarog's forge burned, yet fewer sparks escaped into the sky. He no longer needed to shape the heavens. They remembered their form. Dazhbog's path grew steady, so steady that it began to feel natural. Day followed night, without thought. Light became expectation. Stribog's winds softened, not always gentle, but predictable. The world learned how to prepare. Mokosh remained closest to the surface. Her hands never fully left the soil, but even she grew quieter. Growth happened without her watching every moment. The land had learned patience from her. Veles lingered in the deep. He did not retreat. He simply stopped reaching upward so often. Depth had been accepted. Fear had softened into respect. Perun still stood watch, but storms no longer needed constant summoning. The sky knew when to speak. Rod observed all of this, and for the first time, he did not feel the urge to intervene. This was not abandonment. It was trust. The Slavs believed the gods did not disappear. They receded, like echoes that fade, only because the world has learned the song. Rod moved slowly along the axis one last time. Roots brushed his awareness. They were strong. Above, Prav remained clear, not crowded. Order did not need presence anymore. Between them, Yav breathed steadily. Rod felt a strange reversal. At the beginning, the world had listened to him. Now, he listened to the world, and what he heard was enough. So he did the hardest thing a creator can do. He stopped shaping. The gods followed his example. They did not vanish. They thinned. Their stories stretched longer between appearances. Their voices softened into memory. Humans still unborn would one day mistake this quiet for absence, but absence was never the truth. The gods simply stepped behind the rhythm, behind season, behind soil and storm, behind breath. Rod allowed himself to rest again, not as awareness alone, but as background. The axis remained, the realms held, the world turned, and slowly the age of gods gave way to the age of remembering. The night deepened. The world no longer waited for creation. It lived, and living, like sleep, requires release. One last chapter remains. The night did not arrive suddenly. It spread, like cool air across warm ground, like silence after a familiar song. Dazhbog's light slipped beyond the horizon without urgency. The sky did not resist the dark. Stars appeared quietly, one by one, not demanding attention. They no longer needed to be counted. Wind softened into a resting breath. Stribog let the air drift. Without direction, fire dimmed, but did not go out. Svarog's forge slept, with embers glowing faintly. Mokosh remained with the soil. She did not move. She did not hum. The earth already remembered her. Roots rested in Nav. Veles coiled loosely around them, not guarding, dreaming. Perun stood high, but even the storm learned rest. Thunder moved far away. So distant, it felt like memory rather than sound. Rod no longer stood apart from the world. He was within it, in the curve of land, in the order of stars, in the patience of stone. Nothing watched, nothing judged. The world simply existed. The Slavs believed this was the true beginning, not the birth of gods, but the moment the gods let go, because only then could sleep enter the world, not sleep as escape, sleep as trust. The earth cooled slowly, breath slowed, the axis hummed faintly. not calling, not warning, simply holding. If you listen now, in the quiet around you, you may feel the same settling, thoughts loosening, edges softening. This is how the world rests. The gods do not leave. They become rhythm. They become background. They become the reason. Nothing must happen. Right now, night deepens. Darkness does not threaten. It protects. The long Slavic night wraps the world gently, and within it, everything, stone, wind, fire, light, depth, and memory, drifts into balance. Nothing more is required. Nothing more is coming. The story does not end. It sleeps, and you may sleep with it. Slowly, quietly, safely. The world is holding you now, and it will still be here when morning remembers your name. The night does not fall. It arrives, slowly, as if the world itself has decided there is nothing left to say. Dazhbog's light does not flee the sky. It simply loosens its hold. The warmth that lingered on stone slips inward, colors soften, edges blur. Day does not end. It dissolves. The sky deepens into a darker blue, then deeper still, until blue forgets its name. Stars appear one at a time, not suddenly, not in display. They come the way thoughts appear, when you are already tired, unannounced. Above the world, Prav remains perfectly still. Order does not retreat. It no longer needs to speak. Below, Nav grows quiet in a different way, not waiting, resting. Between them, Yav breathes slower. Wind eases its grip on the air. Stribog does not push tonight. He lets the breath move, only as much as it needs to. A drift, a sigh. Fire settles into itself. Svarog's forge dims, until only embers remain. Not dead, remembering warmth. Mokosh remains with the soil. She does not rise. She does not walk. The land already knows her weight. Roots hold the memory of her hands. Growth pauses, not ends, as if the earth has folded its arms and closed its eyes. Veles loosens his coil. Depth does not pull tonight. It allows. Even Perun rests. Storm does not prowl the sky. Thunder moves far away, so distant it becomes only a suggestion. Rod listens. For the first time since the beginning, he listens without expectation. The world does not ask. It does not wait. It simply continues. This is the moment the old Slavs spoke of in quiet voices. The moment when the gods stop being necessary, not because they failed, but because they succeeded. Creation no longer leans forward. It leans back. Rod feels himself thinning, not disappearing, spreading. He is no longer a presence above the world. He is within it, in the curve of hills, in the rhythm of breath, in the certainty that nothing needs fixing. Time itself slows, not measured anymore. Moments stretch, then soften. Thought loosens its grip. The world has stopped listening because there is nothing left to be told. And in that quiet, sleep finds its way in, not as surrender, as permission. The night grows deeper, and nothing follows it. The night does not fall. It arrives slowly, as if the world itself has decided there is nothing left to say. Dazhbog's light does not flee the sky. It simply loosens its hold. The warmth that lingered on stone slips inward, colors soften, edges blur. Day does not end. It dissolves. The sky deepens into a darker blue, then deeper still, until blue forgets its name. Stars appear one at a time, not suddenly, not in display. They come the way thoughts appear, when you are already tired, unannounced, above the world. Prav remains perfectly still. Order does not retreat. It no longer needs to speak. Below, Nav grows quiet in a different way, not waiting, resting. Between them, Yav breathes slower. Wind eases its grip on the air. Stribog does not push tonight. He lets the breath move, only as much as it needs to. A drift, a sigh. Fire settles into itself. Svarog's forge dims, until only embers remain. Not dead, remembering warmth. Mokosh remains with the soil. She does not rise. She does not walk. The land already knows her weight. Roots hold the memory of her hands. Growth pauses, not ends, as if the earth has folded its arms and closed its eyes. Veles loosens his coil. Depth does not pull tonight. It allows. Even Perun rests. Storm does not prowl the sky. Thunder moves far away, so distant it becomes only a suggestion. Rod listens. For the first time since the beginning, he listens without expectation. The world does not ask. It does not wait. It simply continues. This is the moment the old Slavs spoke of in quiet voices. The moment when the gods stop being necessary, not because they failed, but because they succeeded. Creation no longer leans forward. It leans back. Rod feels himself thinning, not disappearing, spreading. He is no longer a presence above the world. He is within it, in the curve of hills, in the rhythm of breath, in the certainty that nothing needs fixing. Time itself slows, not measured anymore. Moments stretch, then soften. Thought loosens its grip. The world has stopped listening, because there is nothing left to be told. And in that quiet, sleep finds its way in, not as surrender, as permission. The night grows deeper, and nothing follows it. There is nothing left to resolve, nothing approaching, nothing waiting. The long Slavic night has settled completely. Breath slows, thought softens. The world is no longer a place of events. It is a place of holding. If you imagine the land now, it does not move, it rests. Forests stand quietly, water barely stirs. Stone remembers warmth and lets it go. The sky arches protectively above. Nothing presses, nothing pulls. The old stories say this is when the world becomes safe. Not because danger disappears, but because nothing must be faced. Right now, the gods are quiet, not gone. They have become structure. They have become background. They have become the reason you do not need to stay awake. The night does not watch you. It holds you. The earth does not judge. It supports. Breath continues. Without effort, sleep arrives. Without command, the world is balanced. Nothing leans too far. Nothing collapses. Everything that once struggled has found its place, and because the world rests, you may rest too, slowly, gently, safely. There is no ending here, only continuation. The story does not close, it settles, and in that settling, everything becomes quiet enough to sleep. Crescent moon, nothing follows this. There is no next moment waiting behind the dark, no event gathering strength, no answer preparing itself. The world has reached the place where it no longer needs to continue forward. It simply remains. The long Slavic night has settled completely now, not as an ending, but as a state of rest. Above, the sky no longer changes. Stars do not brighten or fade. They hold their distance quietly, like thoughts that have drifted too far away to matter. Below, the earth is still, not frozen. At ease, stone releases the last memory of warmth. Soil holds moisture without asking for more. Roots rest where they have always belonged. Nothing grows tonight. Nothing decays. Everything waits in balance. The gods are not watching. They are not listening. They are not judging the shape of the world or the movement of breath. They have done what they came to do. They have stepped away so gently that the world did not feel the shift. Svarog's fire does not burn high. It sleeps as embers, not needing attention, knowing it can wake again when needed. Dazhbog's light has passed beyond the edge of the world. It will return, not because it must, because the path remains. Stribog's winds are barely present, just enough movement to remind the air that it exists. Mokosh does not walk the land tonight. She does not need to. The ground remembers her hands. It knows when to hold and when to release. Veles rests deep in the unseen places, not pulling, not whispering. Depth remains, without effort. Perun does not lift his weapon. The storm sleeps. Boundaries are understood. Nothing challenges them. Rod is no longer separate from any of this. He does not stand above the world. He does not drift beneath it. He is the quiet agreement that everything may rest. This is how the old Slavic stories end, not with silence that feels empty, but with silence that feels full, a silence that holds, a silence that allows. If you listen now, you may notice how little is required. Breath continues, without instruction. The body remains supported. Without effort, thought slows, because it no longer needs to guard anything. There is no danger approaching, no memory demanding attention, no future insisting on preparation. The world is not asking you to do anything. It is doing the holding for you. The Slavs believed this was the true gift of creation, not gods, not stories, but the certainty that the world can continue without being watched, that it does not need constant awareness. That rest is not absence, but trust. The night deepens, not darker, softer. Edges dissolve, distances lose meaning. Time loosens its grip until it no longer feels like something that moves. It feels like something that pauses. Nothing is unresolved. Nothing is unfinished. Everything that once struggled has found its place. The world remains, And because the world remains, you do not need to. You may drift. You may let go without falling. You may rest without losing anything. The long Slavic night is not closing around you. It is opening, holding you gently inside the same balance that holds stone and sky and soil. Nothing will disturb this moment. Nothing will interrupt the quiet. The story does not continue. It does not end. It simply stays. And you may sleep within it, slowly, deeply, safely. The world is awake enough to watch over itself now. You are free to rest.